for me to tell you a little bit about what we do at the National Hurricane Center in our Marine branch. And so my name is Chris Landsea. I'm the branch chief of 16 Marine forecasters that are busy year-round making wind and wave forecasts, issuing wind-based warnings for the Caribbean, the Gulf, the West Atlantic, and the East Pacific. So we have 10 million square nautical miles. So it's a big chunk of ocean. And so I'm going to be able to explain a little bit about our mission, a little bit about the tools we have, show some of the products, and then talk a little bit about our relationship with the U.S. Coast Guard. So to put what we're doing in perspective of our organization, TAFB is the largest part of the National Hurricane Center. The National Hurricane Center has 60 employees. Most are federal employees. And we're one of 9 national centers for environmental prediction. Another one is the Ocean Prediction Center. And so for those of you who listened in on Darren Fergursky's talk, that's one of the other NCEPs. We're all part of the National Weather Service, which is the largest part of NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So you probably know of NOAA Fisheries or the National Ocean Service as an example. And we're all in Department of Commerce. And you might say that's a little odd. So let's blow that up a little bit here and take a look at that logo for Department of Commerce. So right in the middle is a sailing ship, and on the bottom is a lighthouse. And this has been around a long time for this logo, but it really points to the importance of the weather and forecasts to keep mariners safe. Because of its important non-commerce. And so I always thought that's really cool when you drill down and look at our logo for Department of Commerce. So NOAA itself has made its number 3 strategic goal to accelerate growth in an information-based blue economy. And that's because the blue economy is massive. You know, for tourism, recreation, defense, offshore oil and gas, transportation, fisheries, shipbuilding, power generation, construction, research, it's massive. And so this is a huge, diverse industry that's focused on the ocean. And another aspect is trading. So 80% of all goods traded globally are on ships, not airplanes, not trucks, not trains, but ships. And so it's a huge part of the U.S. economy. And so the more we can do to help people stay safe over the open ocean, as well as to make it a little more efficient. You know, what's the best route, for example, that ships may want to take to not only stay safe, but best economic decisions for not burning as much fuel. So when we're making forecasts, we're doing that under the auspices of not just the United States National Weather Service, but also through the International Maritime Organization. So the IMO is part of the United Nations, and it was founded after the sinking of the Titanic, when it was realized that the global oceans, there's people from every country out there, and you want to be able to have them stay safe. And so the IMO was founded to help provide free forecasts of winds and waves and warnings. And so the United States actually has the Northeast Pacific here, as well as the North Atlantic. And you can see other countries have other parts of the world they provide those forecasts. How we do this within the Weather Service, really, it's broken down geographically. That within 60 miles of the coast, you can see that kind of pink ribbon in the Gulf, the Atlantic, and the Pacific. That's the province of the local weather forecast offices, or WFOs. And so further out from that, the blue shows the offshores by the Ocean Prediction Center, the dark blues that is, and our offshores are the dark greens, and our high seas are the lighter colors there. And so I'm going to focus today on what we do in TAFB, some of the meteorological hazards, some of the products, show you some of the products so that you can become better acquainted with these and help you make better decisions when you're over the open ocean. So one thing that shocked me when I was taking this position 6 years ago was how many giant vessels there are out there. You can go to a website, marinetraffic.com, where the transponders on those that are linked to satellites, so that if a ship gets in trouble, you push the button and the local Coast Guard can come help them. And so this website actually shows all those public transponders. It doesn't show the military ones, but the green are cargo ships, the purple are giant personal yachts, the orange are fishing boats, the red are oil tankers, the blue are tugs and special craft working the oil platforms, and even up the Mississippi River. You can see all these vessels going up the Mississippi. And this doesn't account for the smaller vessels either, the recreational boaters that are going out for the day. But it's amazing how many thousands and thousands of vessels are out on the global ocean every day. So we're hoping people are using our forecasts. And this time of year, even though it's not hurricane season anymore, thank goodness, there are hazards that one has to deal with, whether it's extreme winds, very large wind waves, or very large swell. There's also fog that occurs in the northern Gulf in the winter and spring. And so we want to make sure that you know what those hazards are and plan accordingly for your ship's voyage. So what I'm showing here are areas in the winter and spring that can get gale force, so that's 34 knots, of course, or stronger conditions. And the yellow shows where we get these gales occasionally, and the red shows where we get them very frequently. So let me go into a little more detail on these, because it's important if you're going to be, for example, going along the Mexican Riviera to know what those hazards are. At the closest to California, just off of Baja California and in the Gulf of California, it's fairly common for extratropical cyclones or winter storms, along with the cold fronts, to produce gale force, usually northerlies or northwesterlies. And the same thing in the northern Gulf of California. You can get some gale force northwesterlies in the Gulf of California. As you progress equatorward, hazards are a little less. Sometimes you get enhancements of the winds because of funneling around that curve of southwestern Mexico. And then in the Gulf of Tehuantepec is a huge hotspot. Very, very common for us to have gales. Just 2 days ago, we had a storm force event, which is 48 knots or greater. And this is called by cold fronts that progress across the Gulf of Mexico. And that very dense, heavy air pushes across the Sierra Madre Orientes of Mexico. And there's a gap called the Chavela Pass. And so very, very common, strong cold front, you get that cold air going across that peninsula and reaching the Gulf of Tehuantepec. And so very common to have gale, even storm force. We've actually recorded 2 hurricane force wind events in the Gulf of Tehuantepec in the last 20 years. Continuing further south and east near the Gulf of Papagayo in Nicaragua, fairly common to have gales there. Rare to have them in Gulf of Panama, but they have been recorded. Then you get into the Caribbean Sea. Because of the interactions of the Bermuda High, that's semi-permanent up near Bermuda, along with the semi-permanent Colombian low, causes, in conjunction with the very high terrain of northern Colombia, very strong winds along the ABC Islands and just north of Colombia. Very common to have gales there. Occasionally we have gales in the Northwest Caribbean in the Gulf of Honduras. Very common to have gales in the southwestern Gulf of Mexico, again due to cold fronts here and the funneling of the winds along the high terrain of the Sierra Madre Orientes there. And then we can have some gales in the windward passage between Cuba and Hispaniola, as well as gales just off of Florida. So lots of hazards, and as you can see, a lot of these are tied to land. So sometimes if you're further offshore, the conditions are better for these features that are linked to the topography. So the ways that we forecast starts with our observations. So that's in our toolkit, and we use a mix of both in situ or local observations as well as remote sensed information. We're very fortunate the National Data Buoy Center maintains an array of moored buoys that are anchored to the ocean floor, and they give us winds and waves continuously from those platforms. There's also drifting buoys. NOAA has contracted with the company SOFAR to get those drifting buoys to give us wave heights, and they're really spot on measurements. There's also ships over the open ocean, and I'll go into that detail next, that give us critical information about winds and waves and pressure. To supplement that, we have remote sensed information from satellites. And so this swath here of colored wind barbs, that's from a radar in space called a scatterometer. United States, we don't have any scatterometers right now, but fortunately the European Space Agency maintains 3 of them, or 2 of them, and they got a 3rd one planned. And so we get the observations from that. There's another set of radars in space called a altimeter, and this gives us accurate wave heights to the nearest foot from space. And so these are nice swaths that we get, and they move around every day, so it's not covering the same spot of the Gulf, the Caribbean, or the West Atlantic. So we still have gaps, but it's a nice mix of measurements for us. I did want to really hype up the Voluntary Observing Ship Program, or VOS. This is a global program through the World Meteorological Organization to encourage commercial vessels to provide their observations. The more measurements we get as forecasters, the better the computer models are, and better situational awareness that we have for nasty conditions over the open ocean. You cannot assume that if you're on a big oil tanker, for example, and you're getting beat up by 40 knots of wind, that we know about it. We need you all to tell us. So if your company's not part of VOS, please reach out to Mike Potocny at the VOS program. Another huge tool for us are the satellite images. And so we have a combination of polar orbiting satellites that go around the Earth at low orbit heights, as well as the geostationary that see our blue marble from space, watching the same patch of ocean and land all the time. So since we're tropical meteorologists, often we're seeing the incipient tropical storms and hurricanes with satellites, but even cold fronts like this example shows is a really helpful for us to determining where the features are that are causing the winds and waves. And then the last set of tools for us to put together our forecasts are the global wind and wave models. So there are global models that provide winds and waves all over the Earth. And then there's also regional models. But because we have 10 million square nautical miles, we generally use global models. And we take a mix of the Global Forecast System, GFS, that the National Weather Service runs, as well as the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasting, or ECMWF. And so we'll take those and blend them together to come up with an optimal forecast solution. And then we do run one model locally. It's the only model we run locally. It's a wave model, and it's based on the Nearshore Wave Prediction System. And so this gives us consistent wind waves and swell to match the wind forcing from our forecast. So we always make sure it's a consistent set of wind and waves that you're getting in our predictions. And then lastly, the tool that we use to put all that together is called the Advanced Weather Interactive Processing System, or AWIPS, where it's got everything. It's got the satellite pictures, it's got radar, it's got the ships, it's got the computer models, it's got a database. And that allows us to put together our forecasts of our text, our graphics, and the grids themselves are a forecast that someone can access. So it's really helpful. We don't want to go to 30 different websites to do our job. It just would not work very well. All right, so let's take a look at some of the products. So that's a bit about our mission and some of the tools we're using. Let's look at some of the forecasts. But before we make a forecast, we start with an analysis. It's a weather map, and it's called the Unified Surface Analysis. And 4 different agencies help put it together. We do the little latitudes of the Atlantic and the Pacific. The Central Pacific is done by the forecasters lucky enough to work in Honolulu. The Ocean Prediction Center does the high latitudes of the Pacific and the Atlantic. And the Weather Prediction Center does Alaska, Canada, and the United States. But apparently they don't realize Florida's part of the United States, because we end up doing it. And if you live in Florida a while, you're like, yeah, that's kind of right. We do things differently here in Florida. So let's take a look at what the weather map is today. So Mr. Mike Ticket Check did the weather map for today, and let's bring that up. It's trying. Well, if this doesn't work, then I may skip that part of the show and tell. Of course, I did try this before, and it worked fine. Oh my goodness. All right, I'm just going to restart the PowerPoint. So there's Mike's map from 12Z today. And you can see we've got a stationary front in our waters south of 31 north latitude. There's also a very high amplitude or a very pronounced trough going from the Lesser Antilles up to just east of Bermuda, and a weak low embedded on that. So fairly typical. Developing gale is indicated by the Ocean Prediction Center that's going to start within 24 hours. All right, so let's bring this back up. All right, so that's the Unified Surface Analysis. We also have a tropical weather discussion. And so this is a free form text product. Basically, you get inside the forecaster's brain about what he or she is predicting. And the way we've got it set up is one set for the Atlantic, one for the Pacific. We issue it 4 times a day. And at the top, we focus on the big stuff. Any warnings that are in place for winds, any very large swell of at least 12-foot seas. And let's see if we can access this. Now it's working. So here's the tropical weather discussion that Mr. Tikacek put together. And in this case, we do have gale force winds that are forecast to occur, along with some very large swell. And so he's focused on that. And then further south, actually, we do go all the way to Africa, and in this case, we're mentioning Météo France has a gale warning in place as well. And then we break it up geographically. The Gulf of Mexico, 1 or 2 paragraphs about what's going on now, and then a paragraph from our synopses in our offshore zones talks about the forecast in a broad brush way. Same thing for the Caribbean, and same thing for the tropical Western Atlantic as well. So the rest of our information we provide comes right out of our grids. And so this is gridded information of winds and waves and warnings and weather. And it fuels our graphics, fuels our text products, and the grids themselves are available as products. So if you have a grid reader, you can take a look at our grids directly that way. So the grids, it's worth talking about this a little bit in detail. They're fairly fine resolution, both in space and time. In space, it's a 10-kilometer or 6 nautical mile resolution, and it goes out to 6 days, out 3 hourly for the first 3 days, and then 4 times a day out to day 6. And we provide winds that are at, we call them surface winds, but they're at 10 meters above the ocean, along with gusts. And 10 meters, for those aren't metric, that's about 34 feet. Significant wave height and any hazards, so any warnings that are in place. Now, in the past, how you got your weather forecasts really depended on A, how close you were to the coast, and B, what technology you had on board. And I know that's changing real fast. And so, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about that, especially at the end, about where we're going as an agency for our marine forecasts over the open ocean. But certainly it's worth pointing out, near the coast, you have NOAA weather radio. Further from shore, you have both graphical and voice broadcasts. You also have the text forecasts from Navtex. And then Iridium and Inmarsat, you know, text forecasts of the hurricane predictions and our high seas. And for low bandwidth, FTP mail had been a standard for the cruise community for a long time. But again, I know it's all changing very, very fast. So we want to keep up. One of the traditional text products is the one mandated by the International Maritime Organization, and it's our high seas. And so this is admittedly a little hard to read. This is the forecast I issued just a few minutes ago, talking about that gale warning that's going to be between the Bahamas and Bermuda. And so we realize people aren't reading anymore, and they want more graphical or video information. So we're going to continue providing the high seas forecast. We do it mainly automated now. It's going to be completely automated in a couple of years. A text product that I think is more useful and should remain useful in the future are offshore zones. And so this goes out through 5 days. It's got a resolution of day and night, and it provides wind, wave heights, and any swell and what direction that swell is coming from, as well as any warnings, whether it's tropical storm or hurricane warnings or winter gales or storms. And for each of these little shapes, these polygons, there's a separate forecast. So I can show you the forecast I did today. Hopefully it'll verify pretty well. And so this is our interface. And so if you go up to here, you can see the gale warning that I issued a couple hours ago, where we were expecting winds up to 35 knots on Saturday, and with it seas 10 to 16 feet in combination of wind waves and northeast to east swell. So pretty nasty conditions between Bermuda and the Bahamas over the next couple of days. So this is, again, it's a quick and easy way to take a look at forecasts of what you may be going through or will be going through. We have the same for the East Pacific. So that whole shipping line from California past Mexico, Central America, through the Panama Canal and over to the Galapagos Islands, same kind of information now through 5 days, day and night. Let's just take a quick look because I think it's worth showing. So here's the East Pac GUI that we have available. And so if we look at the Tehuantepec event, which had been a gale force, so this forecast was put together by Elizabeth Adams, and she does not have a gale anymore. So fortunately, folks that were waiting to go through that passage can now proceed as the gale has ended, at least for now. But next week it's going to come back again, no doubt. So radio fax has been kind of the backbone of the over open ocean forecast information for decades, and it's been a great tool. It's something that the U.S. Coast Guard works with us. They maintain these high frequency transmitters, so you can get graphical products over the open ocean by radio technology. So I'm going to have a couple quizzes here. Who here still uses radio fax with a radio receiver? Go ahead, put in the chat if you do or don't. So yes, I still use radio fax, or no, I've not used radio fax. Don't use it any longer. So Brian's going to be monitoring that, but feel free. I'd like to get an idea. Does anyone, any mariners that are listening today, are you using radio fax? Brian, what are we getting?
Let's see, so far Rob Murray has chimed in saying yes, he does, and then we're just waiting on some other responses.
Okay, all right. Well, that's good to know that it still has some use out there. So I'm going to show a couple of the graphics here. So one that's produced a couple times a day, and one set for the Caribbean, the Atlantic, and Gulf, as well as one set for the East Pacific, are our surface progs. And on here, it's got the sea level pressures and these isobars and any features. So during hurricane season, obviously it'd be tropical storm or hurricanes that would be consistent with what the Hurricane Specialist Unit is doing across the hall. And this time of year, it's more frontal boundaries and troughs. So let's take a quick look. This is from last night's forecast that was put together by Karen Rosado Vasquez, and you can see some pretty strong packing of the isobars. So very likely to have strong to near gale conditions north of the Bahamas. And then you've got this pronounced trough. Not likely to become a tropical storm this time of year, but certainly is causing some impactful weather north of the Bahamas right now. So that's an example for the surface progs. We also have an analysis of what the waves are doing. So we do significant wave heights, and it also shows the direction that the dominant wave is coming from. And the values, you can see the individual numbers, they're in feet. Most of our users over the open ocean are international, and they tell us what are feet. Feet are something we put our shoes on. And so they want meters. And so while we're going to continue to do the offshores with waves in feet, our graphics are going to switch to meters for wave heights, as well as our high seas forecasts are going to switch to meters. And so that's where we're responding to the international customers that use this information. A forecast of the winds and waves are provided by our wind wave forecast graphics. And I should have mentioned that all of these graphics are on our website as well. And so that's if you're no longer using RadioFax, right off of our website, and that's how I'm pulling them up right now. Similarly, these are done twice a day, and it's done for day 1, day 2, and day 3. One set for the Atlantic, Caribbean, and Gulf, and one set for the Pacific. So we can take a look at, again, what was done last night by Landsea Ramos. And in this case, that very large fetch of strong to near gale conditions, producing seas up to 17 feet between the Bahamas and Bermuda. Nasty conditions, whereas the Gulf showing only a peak of 6 or 7 feet. So this is pretty typical for this time of year to have some extremely high seas that some vessels would need to avoid. We also provide both as RadioFax and as well as a colorized version on our website, the wave periodicity and direction, where the colder colors are the short period wind waves that reoccur every, say, 6 to 10 seconds, versus the warmer colors that are the very long period, 15 to 20-second period, that are crossing the Atlantic, often going all the way across the equator. And so if knowing the dominant wave direction and the period is important for your vessel, which of course with parametric rolling being an issue for the giant cargo ships, this information is important. This time of year, we also do a wind wave graphic. And so it's a 48-hour snapshot of any warnings that are in place. And so we provide this just during the winter time and spring. And then during the hurricane season, we switch over to the tropical cyclone danger graphic. So it's nice, but it's just a snapshot as what is expected right at 48 hours. And so I'm going to show you an example of where we're moving beyond that in the near future. So one way that one can take a quick look at our grids is with the marine composite page. And so this allows interrogation of our grids directly via low bandwidth JPEGs. And so on the right side is an example of a strong cold front that emerged off the Florida coast a couple years ago. And the colors represent significant wave heights, where blue are less than 10 feet, and the orange get up to about 25 feet there. So some pretty nasty conditions. The left side is a graphical representation of that high seas forecast that I know not many people are reading anymore, where blue represents at least 8-foot seas, orange represents at least 23 knots or a strong breeze, and the red indicates any gale conditions. So if I was going to be going a course from, say, Bermuda down to San Juan, I think I would hold up and wait for a couple days, just until that very high wave and the strong winds would be going past. We have the same for the East Pacific. So if you're going along the Mexican Riviera or the Central America, again, you can access our grids directly off this marine composite page. And we can see, in this case, a very strong Tehuantepec event that did reach about 55 knots or storm force, and that plume of high seas impacting the whole shipping lane just south of Central America. And so again, this is a hazard to be expected in the wintertime. Completely clear skies. It's a downslope wind event, but massive seas and again, gale to storm force winds. So that's what I wanted to show some of those products. Before I get into this, I did want to ask, are any mariners using NavTex? NavTex is a text forecast that focuses on conditions within a couple hundred miles of the coast, and it's really focused on the major ports. Anyone using NavTex, NAVTEX, which text forecast for nearshore conditions? Anyone saying yes, Brian?
I'm still waiting on some responses here, but while we're waiting, we can double back quick to the original radio fax question. We did see one person saying, yep, they still do. Stephen Leeds chimed in saying, I use weather fax. And then Brian Waymeyer chimed in saying, yes, I keep it as a backup option as he's a deep sea commercial mariner.
Yeah, that's good. We're not getting rid of radio fax anytime soon. You know, as long as there's still people that are using it, then we will hold on to it. Um, There's another product. It's called Vobra. It's a voice broadcast similar to NOAA weather radio, but it's can be received hundreds of miles offshore. Please put in the chat if anybody uses Vobra as well. I suspect that number of customers for that has dwindled quite a bit, even more than radio fax. All right, so that's a quick overview of some of our products that you can access. Oh gosh, I almost forgot. I did want to show you what it's going on today. Again, this is a link right on our website. To get to our website, it's just hurricanes.gov/marine. Hurricanes.gov/marine to get to our website. So this is this interface where you can look at our gridded information. So you can choose, do you want winds that are 10 meters above the ocean, 30 meters, or 50? Because of course some giant vessels are very high profile and they might want winds higher above the ocean. So we'll stick with the standard 10-meter wind barbs, and let's put on significant wave heights. We'll use feet, and then see if this is working. It was broken before, but gosh, our technical folks are awesome. So this is working now, and it shows conditions. Colors represent significant wave heights, and the wind barbs are shown there. And so you can go out through 5 days. You can see the really nasty conditions that are going to be occurring between Bermuda and the Bahamas over the next couple of days. But the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico, fairly quiet. All right, so that's an example of using that. And again, we have the same for the East Pacific as well. So I did want to switch base then to a little bit on our services. And we have one core governmental partner that we interact with a lot, and it's the U.S. Coast Guard. So the U.S. Coast Guard, I'm sure everybody's familiar with the wonderful work those men and women do. Um, I'd like you to guess, how many meteorologists does the U.S. Coast Guard employ in their entire force? So just if you want to throw some numbers out there, how many meteorologists, how many weathermen, weatherwomen are there in the U.S. Coast Guard? Any guesses? Brian, is anyone putting a number in there?
Still waiting yet, but
Okay.
I'm interested to see what people come up with.
All right. Okay. Well,
We've got two answers in there, and we've got quite a range. Chris, is the number between 0 and 82?
the number is 0. So they have no meteorologists in the Coast Guard. And so by design, the National Weather Service, we provide forecast and briefing support for the Coast Guard. And every 10 years, the director of the Weather Service and a Rear Admiral in the Coast Guard re-sign this MOA so that we can help them do their life-saving mission. And the way it's broken up throughout the Weather Service is that we at the national centers work with the districts. And so, for example, we work very closely with District 7 here in Miami and District 8 in New Orleans. But we even work with District 5 in Norfolk, District 11 in California on occasion as well. This time of year, how we would interact with them would be to provide a spot weather forecast. So this is a specialized prediction based on their needs. And so it could be for a ship that is in distress. It could be for an aircraft that is ditched over the ocean. It could be for an oil spill. Remember Deepwater Horizon from a couple decades ago. It could be for law enforcement activities where they're chasing the bad guys. It could be for where the Coast Guard has identified a rickety vessel that migrants are trying desperately to reach the United States. Whatever they're asking for, we provide, including man overboard. And did you know, when it's man overboard, it's actually 85% of the time, it's a dude overboard, not a woman. And either guys do stupid things on cruise boats and get in trouble, or I suspect the main reason is still folks working ships and oil platforms are primarily men right now. But that's an interesting factoid. 85% of man overboard are actually dudes. So we gave 157 of these spot forecasts last year in 2023. I suspect the number is going to be about the same this year. And it's to help them in support of issues that they're dealing with way away from the coastline. So we also want to promote the Weather Ready Nation Ambassador Program. Weather Ready Nation is where we work with other government entities and other private organizations to get the word out about the forecast that we provide for everybody free of charge. You know, your tax dollars are paying for our work, and we want to make sure people have access to it and are making the right decisions. So we have a Weather Ready Nation Marine Ambassador. And so if your company is not part of the Weather Ready Nation program, you know, let me know if you like, or you could reach out to the website that's listed there. Another way that we're trying to interact and have been interacting with the marine community is hosting an annual workshop. And so we bring in reps from cruise lines, cargo ships, oil companies, fisheries, the Coast Guard, the U.S. Navy, recreational vessel associations, maritime academies. And so to make sure that we're listening to you all on what you need next, because we want to be responsive as government stewards and provide information that you're finding useful. And one way that we've done that fairly recently is we're providing videos now. And so twice a week, Sunday afternoon and Thursday afternoon, we put on our YouTube channel a 3 to 5 minute video about the forecast for the Caribbean, the Gulf, the Atlantic for the next 5 days. It's called the Tropical Atlantic Marine Weather Briefing. You can sign up for it by Gov Delivery, or you could go to our YouTube channel to get it. And again, it's a summary of what conditions are going to be like, with an emphasis on the big stuff, which would be hurricanes during the June to November timeframe, and then these very strong winter storms this time of year. It's not a new forecast, it's just another way to convey the information in a succinct fashion. Another aspect is we're trying to get our forecasters aboard both NOAA vessels and Coast Guard vessels, with the idea being that only one of our 16 forecasters has really spent a lot of time at sea. And so getting our forecasters aboard these vessels allows us to better understand when we say 12-foot seas, what does that really mean? And Eric Christensen experienced that in the North Sea with the Coast Guard Eagle crew. And so that gives us a better appreciation of what mariners are understanding it, but it also allows us to work with our NOAA Corps and Coast Guard colleagues a little more closely. So to wrap up, I did want to get back to this, about this radio fax thing. And again, it's been a tremendous, wonderful invention and service to the marine community for decades, but it's changing. And the reason, I'm sure a lot of you know, it's Starlink is providing high-speed, reliable internet anywhere on the face of the earth at a fairly reasonable price. It's amazing, great. And so when I ask mariners, so what forecast information, what platform are you using to get it? And a lot of them are telling me Predict Wind or windy.com. And so so I get it. You know, the windy.com, for example, has beautiful graphics of winds and waves. And so one concern of mine, though, is that this is just raw model output. It's not the official forecast from the U.S. government. And I would argue that we have more skillful information than what you can get from a single model. And so what we're looking for long term is to be involved through the International Maritime Organization with what's called the S100 rollout. And this is where the electronic charting and display system, or ECDIS, is going to start having very consistent information from NOAA, whether it's bathymetric information or current information, or what we provide is the weather information. So starting in 2026, it's going to be voluntary for ships to access this. But by 2029, any new systems installed on ships, any new ships, are going to be required to have this new ECDIS system. And what we'll be providing are the gridded information that I just showed you, winds and waves, but with one extra enhancement is we're going to start providing warning polygons. So for example, here it could be where you've got gale conditions, and then inside that storm conditions, and then inside that hurricane conditions. Basically no-go zones to alert you as the mariner for the next couple of days. Where is the real dangerous spot? And again, it would be based upon our official forecast. And so these cumulative warning polygons, we're going to start producing them experimentally in the next few months. And I'm really excited about that opportunity to provide enhanced safety and services for the marine community. So on behalf of the 16 men and women that work here in the largest part of the National Hurricane Center, we're the Tropical Analysis and Forecast branch. Again, to get to our website, it's just hurricanes.gov/marine. You can access our Twitter at @NHC_TAFB. And we actually have a phone number that mariners can reach directly. We don't do ship routing, but if a mariner has a question, we're happy to address it. And so there's our number, 305-229-4424. So I hope this was a useful overview about what we provide at the Tropical Analysis and Forecast branch of the National Hurricane Center, hoping that you stay safe as you transit the open oceans this winter and spring. Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, sorry, Brian. Yeah, does anybody have any questions?
No, we do have one question from earlier on. It was pertaining to the switch over from feet to meters and expressing wave heights. Foster Shucker was asking, when we do switch over from feet to meters, how many decimal points will we show? Because he works with pleasure craft, so whole meters would present somewhat of a problem.
Okay, yeah, so that's a good point. We've been actually debating that amongst the different forecasters. And so what we, gosh, I just realized my camera was off. I'm so sorry. I've got my special tropical shirt for Christmas on here. And so we've decided to do half-meter increments. So that's about 1.5 feet. And so yes, we understand that a whole meter increment, 1 meter, 2 meter, 3 meters, that's not enough information. So we will be providing that in half-meter increments, I think, at this point. But that's still we're working the kinks out on that. That switchover is tentatively scheduled to occur on the 15th of May. Any other questions?
Let's see. Not so much questions, just a couple additional comments. Rob Murray passed along that YouTube videos for the Pacific Coast, and I assume the Pacific Basin would be very welcome. I know that's something we've talked about.
Right. So when we do the tropical Atlantic marine weather briefing twice a week, that's the focus, is the Caribbean, the Gulf, and the West Atlantic. We've discussed whether to provide the same for the Pacific, and it's great to hear that there would be interest by mariners on the Pacific side. So we've got to we're going to weigh in on that and make a decision. But thank you Rob for the suggestion. That's something we've already been considering, and it just depends if we can fit it into our schedule of existing products and services.
Yeah, and then another comment we had again from Foster said, I tell people that the weather people turn data into information. The models are good, but the nuance of a human makes a difference. Yeah, I wholly agree there.
Yeah, and so we've got some incredibly insightful forecasters here that have had years of experience of looking at the computer models, examining the observations, putting together a coherent forecast. And so, I'm very proud of the work that we do 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And I would suspect we're going to help continue to lead the nation, and as NOAA's strategic goal is, help with the blue economy, with safety and efficiency.
Okay. Well, I mean, we still have a little bit of time here. I had a good question. So for those who are in the webinar that, may not be necessarily privy to some future developments at NOAA, kind of leaning into like the decision support services that we were discussing on this call, there's also a big push for NOAA, the National Weather Service, to be using more probabilistic information, kind of encompassing multiple scenarios, more highlights of uncertainty. So I wanted to ask Chris, where do you see not just TAFB, but the National Hurricane Center as well? How do you see us using probabilistic information going forward?
Right. So whenever you make an exact forecast, or what we call deterministic, it's always wrong. Okay. Sometimes it's wrong by a little bit, sometimes it's worse. And so it's better to provide a probabilistic set of information that encompasses the uncertainty. So then you can have like a most likely scenario, but you could also have a reasonable worst case. And so getting that information, I think, is going to be very useful, whether it's winds or waves. And so we are moving toward that because we want to provide more nuanced information. Again, when you make a deterministic forecast, it's always wrong. So we even a small error, you need to understand what the uncertainties are.
That's so definitely true. I am also working as an incident meteorologist trainee deploying to incidents, and I've used a little bit of probabilistic stuff. The partners, the decision makers, they absolutely love it. So can definitely attest to that being a thing going forward.
Yep.
Are there any other questions? I don't see too much else in the chat, but we can give it another little bit here because we still got what 10-ish minutes or so.
All right. Well, I actually need to finish up my forecast products. So I
Fair
think we'll
enough.
just, if anybody does have any follow-up questions, feel free to send me an email. It's chris.landsea. You can see my name there, LANDSEA at NOAA.gov. I'd be happy to take any comments or questions you might have. chris.landsea at NOAA.gov. Awesome. All right. Why don't we say goodbye and thanks for joining us today.
All right, that sounds like a plan. Again, thanks everybody for tuning in. I hope you found this webinar really helpful and really informative. Hope you all have a good rest of your day and an even better rest of the holiday season. Hope you all stay safe and have a wonderful time.
All right. Thank you.